I want to start with a couple of quotes that I found just this last week. You'll recognize the first one. You'll recognize why I'm saying it. You can never be wise unless you love reading. Both of these quotes are from Samuel Johnson, who was an English author in the 1700s. So I've emphasized reading and reading and reading, and I think that's good. So you can never be wise unless you love reading. And the second one is, and Andrew kind of mentioned this morning, people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. And he said something like, you may not hear a lot of new stuff, but if you can just remember one fact. I think that's kind of what he said. And that applies, I think, here as well. And also, in reference to that, I just want to say that maybe what I'm saying is really, really simple. And it's not something that you really need to hear so much because you know it, but yet maybe we can be reminded of it more and will help us in what we do. Also, I want to say as we begin class that the first two class meetings were extreme different type classes. The first class was just pretty much a lecture, and the second class was a whole lot of interaction. And both classes were good. So what I want to do today is a hybrid of those two. Because I do have a lot of information to go over, and I want to go over that, but I don't want to restrict the interaction. So there will be some times, like I did last Sunday, that I will say, okay, now here's when we talk, and I'm going to give you some warning of that, like I did last Sunday. Be thinking about this, and when we get to it, kind of be ready for input. But then, rather than continue on and on and on, I'm going to say, okay, let's move on. That's kind of where I'm planning to go this week as we get started. So this is really a continuation of last week because I didn't get everything in that I wanted to get in. So we talked about these 5 C's, and we even brought up another potential C, and that's fine. But we talked a lot about conviction and competence and communication and construct. So I'm not going to go over those so much this time. I'm going to have one slide on character, which I want to emphasize. We talked about character some last week, but I want to spend some time this morning on culture and or compassion. I mentioned to you about the book Designed to Lead, and this is what he says the 3 C's are. It's conviction, culture, and construct. Online I found something about training leaders, conviction, character, and communication, and that's why I put them together. But as we look at Designed to Lead and this conviction, culture, and construct, he says that all of these are important. You can't just take one, but because all of them are needed. Conviction now, since all of them are needed, let's understand what they are. Conviction is the things that you have heard, the scripture, what's in your heart, what you know, what's knowledge and what drives you. And he also says without that, without conviction, it's going to fail. But when we talk about culture, we define culture as the way we do things around here. And so that's still true. Culture is, and that's really the main part of at least the first half of the lesson today is culture. So then constructs are the systems, the processes, the programs, the things that we have in place that exist. All of these are needed. And if you look at them and you say constructs, now that's systems or programs. If you have that and you don't have conviction, if you don't have it in your heart, if you don't know what you're doing, then you're going to have apathy. Also, if you have constructs and you don't have culture, so you have systems, but that's just not the way we do things around here, then you have exhaustion. Then finally, if you have conviction, that's knowing what I'm doing, but I don't have a way to get it done. I don't have the systems in place to get it done, then I'm going to have frustration. Next couple of slides I'm going to show are slides that I get. I get Dale Carnegie advertisement slides regularly, and so the next 2 slides are Dale Carnegie advertisements. And this is one that I got on May the 18th, and he talked about the benefits of improving the culture in your workplace. So if I want to improve the culture in my workplace, what do? And he says, I need to have inclusiveness in my workplace. And the benefits to that are trust and psychological safety. high engagement, inclusive, so we're more engaged, and empathetic communication. We're going to be talking about empathy in a little bit more in detail in a minute, but then also effective conflict management. Another that I got on July the 20th, he talks about maintaining an inclusive environment. Inclusive, get people involved. And the whole idea of leading is leading people and not directing people, but leading people. And so getting people involved is so important in being a leader. And he says, when I have an inclusive environment, look over the right side, it says I'll have a better, well-rounded workforce. Okay, he's talking about the secular world. So a better, well-rounded members of the church, because I can do things better, like solving problems better decision making, increased innovation, engagement, and even finance. And so those are things that's helpful about having inclusiveness in what we do. Covey said in Habit 5, he says that seek first to understand, then to be understood. I mentioned to you Principle-Centered Leadership book that he wrote, and he says that this fifth principle, this fifth habit, is the principle of empathetic communication. We need to understand first. We need to first understand people that we're dealing with, understand their needs and what they are and what they're doing. Then we can better do it, better have us be understood, we be understood. And that's what communication is all about. So I want to play this clip. I've played it before, so it's been a while. So you may remember it, but even if you do, I think I've always talked about Brene Brown, so we're going to have a clip today from Brene Brown and one next week from Brene Brown as well.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I have it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I ask you, having empathy part of leadership? If I understand people, and if I put myself in other people's shoes, and I'm listening, and I'm understanding, and I'm trying to grow, is that part of leadership? The answer is yes. That's what it's all about. And so it's so important that we have empathy and we understand others first. You see, leading is all about people. It's not about things. It's about people. Yeah, there's places we want to go, there's things we want to do, but leading is getting people on board and getting people to work with you and going in that direction. If I have a problem with someone, and or I think someone has a problem with me, the best thing to do is send them an email and make sure they understand where I think about that. Right? How about picking up the phone and calling them? Yeah, that's better. How about going to them face to face and say, I think we have a problem, and help me understand, and let's talk about it. And that's empathy. In Matthew the 18th chapter, he teaches us that if you got a problem with a brother, go to him and talk to him. In Joshua the 22nd chapter, there's an example of that. When the children of Israel, after they had gone into the Canaan and were victorious, and part of the tribes were going back, and they built an altar, and the others looking and says, what's going on? And rather than going and condemning and saying, what's going on? They says, let's go and let's talk and let's understand. And they did. And they said, okay, now I understand what's going on. And they were all brethren. So that's what we need to do. We need to not be, and by the way, if I don't do this, what am I? One word definition if I'm not practicing this stuff. You may not get it because it's kind of off the wall, but when I say it, you'll say, yeah, that's it. Selfish. I'm selfish. If I'm not doing this, I'm selfish. It's all about Jerry. It's all about me. It's all about what I want, rather than leading and bringing people together and going forward. So, and by the way, Mark Blackwelder was here on July the 7th on Wednesday night and started our summer series after our panels with the visiting speakers. And I know a lot of you were in this class in parenting, but if you get an opportunity, go back and listen to that. And I think sometime throughout this class, I'm going to have a summary of that for you to pick up. But it will do you well to listen to that, because he talks about conflict resolution and how important it is, and some good thoughts on that. So that would be something that you might want to just go online and listen to. So, culture. A low trust culture. Do we want a culture that's low trust? No. I mean, that's not what we want. We don't want to not have trust. Trust is the basis of where we're going. Next week we're going to talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability is necessary for trust. And then the following we're going to talk about how we work together in teams or in marriages or however we work together in building that trust and moving up. But it all starts with trust. So if I have low trust culture, what defines low trust culture? How about high control management? That's reminiscent to me of what Peter said in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3. Don't be like that. Don't be like lords, but be examples. And so if I have a high control management, that's not good trust. That's not building good trust. That has low trust, and we need to work to make sure that we aren't following that type. Or political posturing. Working around the system and coming through the back door and making sure I get my way. Those are things that are low trust. Protectionism. Hey, this is my little area. Don't get in my way. Get out of my way, because this is mine. This is what I'm going to do, and you don't need to be taking me over in what I'm doing. Or cynicism. Believing that, cynicism about various things, but in here he's particularly talking about looking at other people and thinking they're purely self-interest in the things that they're doing. So if I have cynicism about that, then that's low trust. Or internal competition. And really, I would say all of the above is kind of summarized maybe in internal competition. This low trust culture simply cannot work. And so, as I said, next week we're going to start developing that even more, talking about vulnerability, and then the following week, a basis of working together is trust. So, a healthy culture, on the other hand, has a strong identity. A healthy leadership culture doesn't allow for tasks and assignments to be merely handed out to people without connecting responsibilities to the identity of God's people as sons and daughters and servants of our King. In a healthy culture, people are continually reminded who they are. His people, a royal priesthood, and a people that belong to Him. If we forget who we are, we mindfully execute and perform ministry functions without the sacred why behind our actions. The second thing is a healthy culture has a clear mission. See, Jesus ransomed this new community, a special people. That's the church, not simply a random collection of individuals. Combining these two together, 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9 talks about a chosen race, a royal priesthood. So this people is not ransomed only to God, but for the glory of God. At our core, we are a missional people. Because He's redeemed us, our mission is to bring redemption to others. And then the third one, a healthy culture develops, is deeply connected into the health of their leaders. They shape the culture and the ministry of an organization. Biblical leadership development is to find the faithful who will be able. Not find people who are able who might be faithful, but to find faithful people who will be able to lead. But finding one who displays like the spirit, the fruit of the Spirit, for example. Spiritual leadership requires Spirit-filled people. So concluding this and putting all this together, then a healthy culture that values leadership development has a strong identity, a clear mission, and is committed to selecting and deploying godly leaders. So, input from you. What do you think about characteristics of a good culture? Something we've already said to maybe highlight more, or something maybe we haven't talked about yet? What is a characteristic of a good culture in your mind?
Hey, Jerry, when I think about culture, I go back and I think about in 2010, I had the opportunity to open up Springer Middle School as a brand new school. And I wanted it to have an atmosphere of learning, of course, but I also wanted it to have an atmosphere where people enjoyed working there.
Okay.
Students enjoyed coming there. So your culture, in all, encompasses the atmosphere of what you have, whether it's a poor culture, bad atmosphere, or it's a great culture, and it's a great place to be. And that reflects to church too.
Okay, so can you say enjoying?
That's right.
Enjoying. Yeah, good. Good. Somebody else? Yeah, Carol.
I think in both the school system and the leadership position I was in, and what I do now in home care, the two things that have been very evident to me is that people want to be trusted and they want to be valued. So making people feel like they are bringing something to the table that's worthy, and trusting them to carry out what you've called them to do, what you've hired them to do. I think that is something, instead of, like you said before, like micromanaging everything and saying, like, this is mine, I want it this way, and this is how it's going to be, but trusting people to use their expertise and experience, I think is really important.
Okay, so trust. Back up a few slides, and she's just saying what we said earlier in a few slides in a different way. Inclusive workforce. Having trust in people. And as I say, we're going to develop that more. Another? Yes.
I think a growth mindset, the culture having a growth mindset, because I think in the church, it's in our scope of practice, if you're a Christian, to be a leader. Like, you absolutely are a leader. It might just be of one person,
Yeah, right.
it might be of your children, whatever. But it's not always in our scope of competence to be a leader, right?
That's right.
Like, not every Christian, once you're baptized, just miraculously. And even people who are natural leaders can continue to grow. So I
Right.
just think that growth mindset of continually learning.
That's perfect. And the reason I say that's perfect is just I don't even think that was in the things that I talked about, but it should be growing, But having said that, and maybe I haven't talked about it, one of the classes that we're going to have coming up is at least half the class is going to be about growing and growing it. But yeah, so that's the culture that we want. The culture that we want is enjoyment, having happiness, trusting people and valuing people, and growing. So those are things that that really we want in a culture and who we are. One more, yeah, JD.
I've actually got two, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One of them, I think consistency. When leadership, presents or proposes a culture or a goal, an end goal, there has to be a consistency of communicating that and exemplifying that. And I think both from the leadership and those who are following the leadership, there has to be a consistency of this is what we're working towards. And then right with that, I think patience has to be a part of that, because culture is not built in a day.
That's right.
And I think we all have our ideals and our mindsets and our, what we would like to see. And many times those things probably all match up in the end. But I think sometimes we get sidetracked thinking that it's not fast enough, or because I'm that way. I mean, you know how I am as a youth minister, and I like to see things happen, but I also have to remember that I have to be patient, because it's not all just about what's going on in the youth group or in my life as a youth minister.
Right.
It's about the health and the solidarity of the church as a whole. And so I think both consistency and patience are big when it comes to culture.
Okay, I like those, consistency, sure. But patience, and I hadn't thought about highlighting that as well, but, you don't just come in and say, okay, this is a new culture, this is what we're going to start doing. It takes time. It takes development.
Love and praise.
Okay, love and praise, all right? That's going to help with a lot of things that we're talking about too. Yeah, love and praise. And so, I would just summarize what I thought you might say is I trust, we didn't say that, empathy, including others, lead by example, not managing by rules, and teamwork. And then you had other things as well. And so that is good. Okay, I want to go on and character. In the Marines, it says that leadership is a matter of character, not just strength, intelligence, or achievement. And then this is in Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, and he also says leadership is not about being right all the time. It's about a responsibility that hinges almost entirely on character. And you can talk about trust, you can talk about communication, you can talk about enjoyment, you can talk about growth and all this kind of stuff, but the very basis of it comes back to character. If I'm not living it, if it's not a part of my life, if it's not who I am, all that other stuff is great and good, but it's not going to get anywhere because I'm not leading by example. So what I want to do now, and I want you to think about, because I'm going to talk about some things, and so the next discussion point I want you to talk about is the goals and expectations of this series of classes. But before that, average leaders raise the bar on themselves. Good leader raise the bar on others. But great leaders inspire others to raise their own bar. And I just thought those were good thoughts, and it came from Orrin Woodward. I was just going to tell you, there's some handouts back there. I know this was out there last week, and I didn't highlight it, so I wanted to mention to you today. This is a book on leadership by John MacArthur, and he has 26 points, and this just shows you the first 13 of those points. So, expectations in this class. What I would like for this class to do, and this series of classes is, what I would like for you to do is prepare for the next class. And I can tell you, I have some handouts, more handouts on the front side of the new handouts, and at least the first 3 of those are preparing for the next class. It's not the presentation that I'm going to get, but a lot of the things come from those presentations. And so if you look at those things and study it, then you will be better prepared for the next class. But also regurgitate last week's lesson. You know, think about progressing and how we're going in all this. But really the next three are really what I want us to think about is growing. We should be growing as a result of this. And that's what Allison was talking about a few minutes ago. But then we also talked about it in the first class, is be open-minded. And then obviously we want to make application to it. And I've said this multiple times, and you're going to keep hearing me say it because this is who I am. Give me feedback. And I'm not talking about, oh, that was a great job, yeah. I'm not saying don't do that. But give me feedback on what can be done better. You know, how can we go in a better direction? And just because you say, let's do this, doesn't mean I'm going to do it. But it gives me some insight of what most of the class wants and see if we can go in that direction. Always put God first. And this is a large amount of information. And so I'm putting out a lot of things for you to read. And trying to be not careful to overload you in class. I want us to be focused, be excited, positive, encouraging, a reader, passionate about Christianity. And that means our faith, Jesus, the church, Graymere. Passionate about leadership and our core value, whatever my particular core value is. And then growing in knowledge, action, faith, and discipling. Ask yourself, do I love this company that I want to lead? I'm really thinking about back in secular things, but now let's apply it to us. Do I love the church, the blood-bought institution? Do I love the local church? That's great. Remember now, church is the people. Do I love the people? But let's be more specific and understand what people are. It's all the people. Not just the people that are easy to lead, but even people that are need more help, maybe. I love all the people.
And Jerry, going along with that is you better love yourself.
Yeah, love yourself too. That's a good
You got to
point.
start there.
Yeah,
And that's difficult sometimes.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. My personal goal is to present information, but also to help us grow in our thinking, help all of us to be better leaders wherever we are and wherever we're doing, to be better leading in whatever we're doing, and apply all these things to myself. But most of all, really, if there's a one phrase definition of the purpose of this class, is to develop leaders, wherever you are, but to develop leaders. It's not to indoctrinate. It's not to say, this is what I think, and so you need to take it on too, because this is the right way. It's not to be critical. I said this at the beginning. This is not to criticize any processes in place. It's not to be critical of me or somebody else or some other congregation, the way they do things. This is not what this is all about, but it's about where I am today and what I personally myself can do to go forward in being better. That's what it's all about. And it's not to be those type of things, but it is to develop leaders. There, that word is, again, to develop leaders. To promote the Bible, positives, good qualities, teamwork. To diminish things like rules and pharisaical tendencies. To be open-minded with critical thinking. To enhance things like evangelism, love, fellowship, understanding of leader function. To assess where you are, where I am in my Bible knowledge. What can I do more about gaining better Bible knowledge and or my leadership opportunities and capabilities. And then really to prepare for the future. And books like Design to Lead and Doing the Mountains, I think, are examples of that. So, your input, goals, and expectations. What do you think? What's something that you want to, again, enhance something I've already said or add to it? It says, yeah, I want for myself, as a result of the series of classes, to fill in the blank.
I think if we're really wanting to become a more compassionate and a more empathetic church, we have to fight the problem, which is opposite of that, which is apathy. The problem the church faces today isn't hate for the outside world, even though that's what the outside world may think. It's apathy for the outside world. So the solution to that is that question that you just had up there. We have to love the outside world for the potential of the leaders they can be in the church. I I didn't grow up in the church, and if no one had loved me for the potential I showed, I wouldn't be here today. So in turn, we have to take that and make sure that's a big mission of ours, is we have to love people for their potential, not who they are right now.
So are you saying that if we aren't careful, we come here every Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday night, and we put our arms around each other and say, look how good we are,
Yeah.
and we're following God, and we're doing what God wants, but we forget our real mission, and that is to seek and save the lost.
Right, we become more of an outcasting church than an outreaching church.
Yeah, we need to be an outreaching church, okay? Good. Somebody else?
Be a better husband.
Okay. You know, we're going to be talking about vulnerability next week and teamwork the following week, but the basis of team is what? Marriage. Being a better leader in my marriage, a partner in my marriage. So yeah.
And I say that, not joking, I thought Becca would enjoy that, but I think one of the things that I know I get caught up with, and anybody that has a business or has employees, you strive to be a leader each and every day at your job, and especially if you have a lot of people that you're overseeing. And what happens a lot of times is you put so much effort into that, and when you get home, you forget your leadership there, and you forget it in the church. And I've been down that road to where, you know, you forget about those pieces of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we see so many people in the world today that are so successful at business, but you look at their lives, and they've had how many marriages? They, you know, at the end of their life, they can look back and people talk about what a horrible friend they were, what a horrible person they were, and you start thinking about, those are not leaders. You know, they might have been successful in one aspect of life. So I think, for my goal and, maybe others, is to become a leader throughout life, and to see and to try to, make sure that in all things you're being a leader.
Good. So can I summarize what you said is balance? Balance my life in my leadership abilities. Somebody else?
Well, I think what Brian said right there was very important. I think that in order to be a good leader, you do not have to be good at everything.
That's true.
You have to have knowledge of where your weaknesses are, so that you can have support where that is. And that comes from humility. That comes from being aware of you and who you are. Because when you take and expect a leader to have all the qualities, you're putting them on a pedestal that they will fail. Where they cannot do that, because none of us are all perfect.
And going along with that, I think as you lead, whether it's by yourself, you're leading a church, or you're leading a business, there's priorities that you have to make. What is my main priority?
Okay.
It's God.
All right.
It's God in that, and then it's their family, and then it's their job, and then it's their employees. But you forget about, sometimes you get into the world and you forget about all those things, and that there's levels that you have to participate in all of them in leadership.
Okay.
So everybody sitting here is a leader in some capacity. We have different roads to follow, but you have to lead, and no matter who you are you going to be a good leader, or are you going to be a bad leader?
Right.
But you have to prioritize where you're going to lead.
Okay, so these are good points, and this helps emphasize some directions that we're going, because one of the classes that I'm going to be talking about, one of the main part of that class is talking about priorities. One of the tools that I'm going to talk about in developing things is SWOT analysis, and one of those things is understanding my weaknesses, and that helps me be a better leader or a better church or whatever. You want to say something?
To be, my goal is to be an exceptional person. I don't think I am, I don't know if I can be, but that's what I think a leader is. They're not always the head of a company or whatever, but you think about your life, your friend group, whatever. There's leaders that morph out of all those, whether they ever take the role or not, they have the characteristics of this. Those people can influence people around them.
Okay.
Those people can help change the lives of people around them. There have been people that saw things in me that I couldn't see. I want to be that for somebody else. I don't want the notoriety, I don't just want to be in somebody's will or anything like that, but there are steps that I took in this life I would not have taken without a nudge, a push, or a challenge by somebody else. And I think every person in this room could be more than what they are with the right person around them.
Okay, very good point. So can we all say, yeah, I want to be exceptional. I want to step up. I want to go further. I want to be better. Yeah.
Continual self-examination.
Continual self-examination. Examine myself, understand where I am so that I can be better. Yeah, David?
Of all these people who've spoken, I know them because I've worked with them. I've seen them be those leaders. I had the opportunity to encourage them, select them, help them. But a lot of this room, I don't know what they're doing, and I haven't known what they're doing. And at my age, I think a good goal or expectation for me is, number one, getting to know the people in this room.
Okay.
I've already, some people have made some comments, I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
there's an element, wow, there's a different, and so that encouraging, that building up, and that goes along with what Aaron just said, lifting arms, those things happen.
Yeah.
That's a good expectation.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Okay, JD, and then we're going to move on.
My goal, I think for me, I would want us to be challenged as a church too, would be to think more sanctified and not always qualified. I think as leaders, we're not qualified sometimes, and there's a difference between sanctification and perfection. One of kind of 1 Peter 1 and 2 are kind of favorites of mine, because in 1 Peter 1 he says, "Be holy, for I am holy." You're sanctified, not because you deserve to be sanctified, or not because you are holy enough yourself, but he still does say there is a standard to which you live, and that is the set apartness from the world in chapter 2, when he calls his people a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you might declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. And Allison talked about, we're all leaders. To me, that's the sanctification aspect, remembering that we might not always live up to every single qualification, but we definitely need to be striving for being separated from the world and trying to live the life that God has set before us.
Good point. We don't possess all these things to the nth degree, which reminds me, a lot of times churches, especially in, maybe I shouldn't say especially in foreign countries, I just know that in particular, will not have leaders because, yeah, well, I'm not that good. Nobody here is that good. Well, trust me, I'm not that good. Okay? And we don't have to be perfect, but we have to be growing. We have to be reaching. We have to be striving. Okay? So those are all good points. So thank you for your input. So kind of summing it up, this is again from Leaders Eat Last. True leadership is not the bastion of those who sit at the top. It is the responsibility for anyone who belongs in the group. Though those with formal rank may have high authority to work at a greater scale, each of us has the responsibility to keep the circle of safety. Now he talks about circle of safety, so let's go ahead and talk about what is he talking about when he talks about circle of safety. The feeling of belonging, shared values, a deep sense of empathy that dramatically enhances trust, cooperation, and problem solving. So let's back up. Each of us has a responsibility to keep the circle of safety strong. We must start today to do the little things for the good of others, one day at a time. All of us be the leaders that we wish we had. So don't look and say, the guy leading me doesn't know where he's going or what's going on, what's doing, and I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is what I can do for myself to make me a stronger person, to make me better and growing and moving forward. So to me, this kind of summarizes what I want each of us to think about where I am, where particularly I am, and what I'm doing in my leading. So another thing that I'm not sure that I emphasized well enough, if you want a copy of the presentations, it has this slide on there. And for example, if you want to know about founding fathers of leadership, if you go here, you can, am I not There you go. So this is kind of a summary of Founding Fathers of Leadership. That's just an example. So all of these that have underlined are links to the website, and you can say, oh, this book is about this, he's talking about this, he's talking about such, and so on. Or, in the next slide, if you want to say, yeah, what is Brene Brown talking about when she talks about the myth of vulnerability? Once again, you can go to the website and you have a 5-second vacation memory. Skip the ad, and then that's too loud, and so that's what that is. And so my point is, there's a lot of good links to this that you can go to, and I don't have time to get into all of it, but you can go to and better understand. And then for Vulnerability by Brown, Notes on Brown, Cynic, Leaders Are in Charge, especially those three, all these are out for you to pick up, but especially those three are going to introduce us to next week and something that you can be preparing for. Leader versus manager, maybe not so much next week, but that for sure is coming down the road. And then Schultz, I believe that was a guy's name at Starbucks, at least at one time when he wrote this, and his points on leadership, and that is out there as well, and he's got some good points. Then I just want to close by saying I've reorganized the way I'm going to do this class. So what I put out to start with is not where we're going today. I've moved teamwork up and divided it into two. So next week, as I mentioned earlier, is vulnerability, and that's what we need to start with, and then we're going to talk about teams. And then we'll go into things like growing and changing and better and prioritize and attitude and so forth as we go forth in the next few classes. Any questions or comments over class today? I hope we hybrided it. It's not a word. I hope I did a good job of making a hybrid of this class to where I still was able to get my information, but got good feedback from you, and that was my goal. So thank you for being here today, and look forward to seeing you next week.